And now I know it's what you've all been waiting for. We're going to talk about cholesterol. And we're going to talk to Dr. Devane, who's an internal medicine physician here in Florida. And we'll talk a little bit about cholesterol and why it's important that you know about it and what you need to do about it, and why if you don't do something about it, bad things can happen. So stay right with us.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Today we're here with Todd Devane, who is an internal medicine, which means a doctor for adults. And he is here in Fernandina Beach at Amelia Internal Medicine. And we're going to talk today about cholesterol. So, everybody's heard of cholesterol. But I don't know that people really know what cholesterol is and why we care about it. So that's what we're going to talk about. So, what is cholesterol?
I guess the best way to look at cholesterol is to look at it as what it does to you. It's just like diabetes and blood pressure. Blood sugar at 300, if it didn't cause any problems, we wouldn't worry about it. Blood pressure of 190 over 100, if it never caused any problems, we wouldn't worry about it. But cholesterol, just like those conditions, increase your risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, heart attack, kidney disease, peripheral vascular disease. So you want to do something about that, which is identified as a risk factor for cardiovascular disease, to decrease the risk of the person ever developing any problems with that. So with cholesterol, we know that if you lower the cholesterol, you're going to decrease the risk. Now, if we knew what was going to happen to everybody, we wouldn't have to worry about it in everybody, but we don't. We can't predict who's going to have heart disease, who's going to have a stroke. We know that as you get older, it can occur, therefore we focus on lowering the cholesterol. Cholesterol is a molecule that is found in a lot of food substances, but it's also made in our own body. So you could eat not a single molecule of cholesterol, and you'd still have cholesterol in your system.
So is cholesterol in your blood?
Cholesterol is, it's actually used in multiple areas of your body. It's in the bloodstream where we measure it and where it can cause the most harm. People need to pay attention to their cholesterol values and what they're eating. You know, try to keep your cholesterol under control. There's multiple different types of cholesterol, and I get this question all the time. People say, okay, what's my good, what's my bad, and when I add my good and my bad together, is that my total cholesterol? And no, it's a little more complicated than that, but for the purposes of what you should do to control your cholesterol, we think of the good versus the bad. And an easy way to remember that, and this is the way I learned it so it would stick with me as I was going through school, is H is happy and L is lousy. So your HDL is your good cholesterol and your LDL is your bad cholesterol. There's also an IDL and a VLDL, but that's not all that important. It's the good versus the bad that we're concerned about. Now, cholesterol is a molecule, so it's just a single molecule. The good and the bad is how your body packages it to take it from one place to another. Cholesterol is produced in your liver. Cholesterol is in your bloodstream. It gets into the walls of your arteries. Bad cholesterol is the cholesterol that's packaged in your liver and goes out to the rest of your body. That's what gets into your arteries and causes harm. Good cholesterol is how your body packages the cholesterol to bring it out of the arteries and take it back to the liver, where it's broken down and used to produce other things in your body. So if your good is high and your bad is low, that means that more is coming out of your bloodstream and out of your arteries and being broken down into something else. Whereas if your bad is high, that means you've got too much floating around. It gets into your arteries, it causes damage, it causes blockages to occur, and that's what we're trying to avoid by lowering the cholesterol.
So are the blockages in the bloodstream, do they act like plugs essentially? Is that what causes the damage?
It's not really plugs, and you're getting into a more complex explanation. But the bottom line is, think about your sink with hair. You know, you don't go from being a perfectly wide open pipe to all of a sudden being closed off. You cut your hair, you shave, you wash your hands, and gunk builds up on that pipe, and then one day it closes off. That's kind of what happens to your arteries. You get a cholesterol building up, and you slowly start developing a blockage. And then all of a sudden you have a artery that's 80 to 90% blocked, so it's a lot easier to close that artery off than one that's not blocked at all. And so it's the development of this atherosclerosis, or hardening of the arteries, that eventually will lead to the heart attacks and strokes. So if your parents had heart disease in their 50s, then there's a good chance that you're going to develop it earlier than life than, say, if your parents had it in their 80s. Now, there's certain risk factors for vascular disease that you can do nothing about. I can't do anything about genetics. No doctor can. But you can modify the risk factors that promote hardening of the arteries. If somebody smokes, tell them not to smoke. If somebody has diabetes, keep that blood sugar under good control. If they have high blood pressure, keep their blood pressure down. And check your cholesterol and keep an eye on it. And cholesterol is something that, remember, is produced in your body. So very commonly I'll put a person on a medication, or I'll tell them, watch your diet, and they come back in, their cholesterol's good. I'm like, okay, you did a good job. And then 6 months later I check their cholesterol and I'm like, it's high again, what happened? And they're like, well, it was better, so I stopped taking the medicine and I quit watching my diet and I went back to eating ice cream at night. And so no, it's something you have to continually work on to keep where you want it, just like your weight, your blood pressure, your diabetes, and all the other risk factors that you have to modify to keep from blocking off arteries.
So somebody comes in and you check their cholesterol levels and they come back with whatever they come back with. What are you looking for? What are you wanting them to be? Because you're talking about the happy
versus the bad.
About lousy, and so what do you want them to be?
The guidelines that we live with right now are from the NCEEP. If you have no risk factors whatsoever, no genetic predisposition for blocking off arteries, a bad cholesterol of less than 160 is actually considered okay. That's not usually what we try to treat. Anything greater than 130, we still want to try to get it down. But a bad cholesterol of 160 may actually be okay in certain circumstances. Most people have some degree of risk factors. They have, some family members maybe that had heart disease or a stroke. They smoke. They've got a history of diabetes. So if you start adding in the other risk factors, you want that number lower and lower and lower. So for the average person with not a lot going on, less than 130 is good. For somebody that has already developed heart disease or has things that would increase their risk, for a person that has these risk factors, smoking, heart disease that's developed already, vascular disease of any kind, previous stroke, kidney disease, you want the number lower, so we shoot to get it less than 100. If you have an occurrence of cardiovascular disease, if you've already had a heart attack, you had a blockage that had to be opened up, and you have diabetes, that's a double whammy for development of another blockage. So you really want that number less than 70. So it depends upon the severity. Now, one of the questions I often get is, well, why don't we take everybody and get them down to 70 if that's going to, decrease the risk of heart disease? And that's what you're talking about, primary prevention versus secondary prevention. Secondary prevention means you've already developed the disease. We don't want it to happen again. Primary prevention means you just go out and take everybody and say, okay, let's lower everybody's cholesterol to this number and see how many heart attacks we can prevent. Well, the numbers really don't justify doing it that way, because you would probably have to treat about 1,000 people to get their cholesterol down to 70 to prevent maybe 4 to 5 heart attacks. Whereas if somebody already has heart disease, you know that they're going to develop it again. You just want to delay it as much as possible. So the takeaway message there is, if you have heart disease, we really don't want you to have it again. If you don't have heart disease, we don't know if you're ever going to develop it. So we try to modify the risk factors, but not as much as we would try to prevent in somebody who already has heart disease. Now, the good cholesterol is another issue. You want the good cholesterol higher, but we can lower the bad easier than we can raise the higher. There's very few things we have that will on a regular basis raise the good cholesterol.
So is
So-
that what the medications do?
The medications primarily lower your bad, because you'll hear people talk about ratio. Okay, what's my good versus my bad? And obviously a ratio is better if you have more good and less bad. If you have less good and a lot of bad, if you lower the bad, you improve the ratio.
Then for you to treat somebody, you're really looking at the ratio. And the only method that the medications work on is lowering the bad.
The medicines will help raise the good a very small amount, usually only about 1 or 2 points. The cholesterol medication that's available right now does a much better job of lowering the bad and improving the ratio.
Okay. So what about diet? Does diet work?
Diet is important. Diet is useful. It usually doesn't lower the cholesterol any more than about 10 to 20 points at most. Low fat, low cholesterol, low sugar, low carbohydrate. Those are the things that will affect your cholesterol. A higher protein diet and more fresh vegetables, you're going to minimize your cholesterol.
I want to talk a little bit about the family of medicines that are out there to treat cholesterol, but also what the side effects are. So, what medicines are out there?
The most commonly used, I would estimate, would be the statin. Statin medications are like Lipitor, Zocor, Crestor, Pravachol. Those medications work in your liver to block the production of the cholesterol.
Anything else you think people should know about cholesterol and whether they should do anything about it?
You don't know that you have a blockage that's developing until it gets to the point where it's actually starting to affect how your body's functioning. So you have these health fairs, you have places that'll check your cholesterol. When you give blood, they'll give you a cholesterol value. Just know what it is. It's no more rocket science than just checking your blood pressure periodically. It's generally about $35, and it's nothing more than a little finger stick. They've gotten that sophisticated at checking the cholesterol. And not only is it the total cholesterol, they'll give you the breakdown of the good versus the bad. There's several medications that are on the generic list that we know now are like $4 for a month's supply of medication. There's medications on those lists that will help lower cholesterol. So cost is not that much of an issue as you would think. You can adequately treat the cholesterol very inexpensively, and follow the cholesterol and check it inexpensively. It doesn't have to be a $100 bill every time something happens.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Enjoy
I don't
this.
think I've seen you so animated.
Well, let's talk about healthcare.